I want to bring on our very first speaker for the day, and that is Alisha. And she's going to be talking about social rules for DAOs. So without further ado, let's welcome Alisha and get the summit started. Hi, Alisha.
Hi, how's it going? Okay, sorry, I don't have video at the moment, but I'm just going to share my screen.
Everything is good to go.
Cool. So, hi, I'm Alisha.eth, and I'm the governance lead at ENS. And over the last year or so, I have been working on launching the ENS DAO and then kind of facilitating, putting in place infrastructure to allow the DAO to run. And in July this year, we kind of just hit the start of our second term. So we had been running a structure called working groups for 6 months. And it kind of led me to reflect on the time since launch. And I ended up writing this piece, Social Rules for DAOs. And I thought I could just run through this piece because social rules, I guess, are something that people tend not to really focus on or perhaps think about as an afterthought, especially if you are launching a token. A lot of thought goes into everything that you need to do to launch, so related to token distribution, getting contracts set up and things like that. But what I really have spent most of my time doing since November last year is thinking about what happens once you launch a DAO and you have the mechanism to govern a project or a protocol through executable proposals that are done on-chain by token holders. But a DAO is much more, in terms of operating efficiently, is much more than just getting token holders to vote. So ENS has kind of implemented a range of different social structures or social environments that kind of hopefully increase the efficiency and also help the DAO work towards its kind of North Star of promoting the development and adoption of ENS. So I guess the starting point is what people think a DAO is. And so basically a DAO in its purest form is a collective group of token holders who use tokens to interact with a smart contract that can be used to govern a protocol or manage a treasury. And so that's kind of the strictest definition of what a DAO is, which is that it's just essentially the smart contracts and then the token holders around that smart contract that vote. But I guess like over the last 12 months in particular, we've kind of come to think of DAOs as including, all of the different social environments that kind of work alongside the DAO. And so that is kind of where actually a lot of, I guess, like the culture and the action happens as it relates to a DAO, because passing a proposal is like quite straightforward. The ENS DAO uses Tally, which a lot of other DAOs in the Ethereum ecosystem do as well. And so that's one component. And kind of beyond that, I think it was important for me to be able to put in infrastructure that allowed the DAO to get to the point of passing proposals. And so thinking about that, just kind of zoom in on this image. Okay, so all of these different kind of components of the social environment of the ENS DAO kind of came to being at different points in the timeline in the last year or so. And so I'll just quickly run through different things or different components of the social environment for ENS and the DAO. So there's Snapshot, the governance forum, the constitution, we have Twitter, a governance process or proposal flow, working groups, working group rules, and Discord. So basically every community in Web3 has a lot of these components, if not all of them. And I think potentially a thing that is different about the ENS DAO is that we've been, or I guess I've been pretty aggressive in really formalizing a lot of the rules around some of these different aspects of the social environment. So I'll just quickly run through in terms of kind of what happened when we launched the DAO, the ENS constitution, the ENS DAO constitution was a really important part of our airdrop strategy. And as part of the claim for the ENS token, people had to sign in and basically approve or reject each of the 5 articles to the Constitution. And this means that, so this happened on Snapshot. It means that ENS actually has, I think, the largest snapshot space on Snapshot if you go to snapshot.org. And the reason we did that is because we felt it was important to have the legitimacy of as many token holders as possible in terms of kind of affirming that constitution. The reason that's important is because ultimately with a social proposal, there is nothing kind of backing up a social proposal. It is really just people choosing, essentially like opting in to adhere to those rules. And so we actually had over 137 addresses eligible to claim, and the Constitution passed with 15 million votes out of, I think, 25, well, maybe a bit less than 25 million approving the Constitution. And I would say in terms of kind of the rank of importance of social rules within a DAO, that a Constitution, in my opinion, is perhaps the single most important kind of social rule that you can put in place in not only a DAO, but potentially even like a community. And it essentially provides a North Star for every participant engaged in a DAO, whether that is the delegates or community members or token holders who hold the ENS token and are delegating, and the core team and participants in working groups. So a constitution just means that everyone, kind of irrespective of their background, their personal interests, and kind of whatever their project interest might be, know that when they come to the ENS DAO, what the goal is. And so something that's quite interesting, just in the last week and week and a half, we have had kind of a lot of discussion within the ENS community from people like Vitalik and Nick.eth, who is the founder of ENS, who have kind of raised suggestions that have been discussed on Twitter. And they actually kind of, if they were to be implemented, would be a breach of the Constitution. So I had the tweet, but I don't have it at the moment, but essentially Nick kind of tweeted about donating funds from objectionable.eth names to charities. And the reason that this would be kind of unconstitutional if it was implemented in the form that it was suggested is because it states in Article 3 that income funds ENS and other public goods. And so a donation to a charity outside of the scope of Article 3 of the Constitution is essentially a breach of the Constitution. And so that's just like a really tangible example of how something like a constitution as a document can be used in everyday in practice to, I guess, like keep the DAO aligned and like heading in the direction that it was intended. Another example is Vitalik talking about implementing harbinger taxes for ENS names or .eth names. And again, so in Article 2, it says fees are primarily an incentive mechanism. And one of the statements that Vitalik made was that ENS was leaving money on the table. And so there might be a better way to kind of capture that value. But Article 2 of the Constitution states that, the intent is not to capture the maximum amount of value. It's just to disincentivize squatters and to ensure kind of that names have a better chance of being used. And so, those are kind of two examples that we've just had literally in the last week of how the Constitution has been really important. And I would definitely recommend kind of thinking deeply about a constitution if you participate in a DAO and it doesn't have one. And another reason a constitution is really important is just because it empowers individuals who are within the community, whether they might be delegates or stewards, to kind of make decisions that don't rely on kind of their personal assumptions, but objectively they can say, based on what this grant is requesting, I can see that it is aligned with Article 3 of the Constitution, therefore the DAO should grant the funds to this project. So yeah, that is the Constitution. And then another really kind of important part of the ENS DAO are the working groups. So if I just go back up here. So working groups and working group rules. And the reason that I guess I kind of drafted working group rules for the ENS DAO a month after the launch of the DAO was because without some sort of structure, ultimately every proposal or vote needs to go to a DAO-wide vote. And this is a huge drain on the scarcest resource in crypto, at least, which is attention. And so creating working groups was a way to allow the DAO to have, I guess, like these entities through which it could more effectively and efficiently carry out the objective of the DAO, but not kind of burden delegates at the same time. And so the working group rules are really extensive. And we actually ended up asking Snapshot to increase the word limit of Snapshot proposals to accommodate the length of the working group rules. But basically within ENS, there are 3 working groups: meta governance, which relates to the DAO; ENS ecosystem, which relates to the maintenance and development of the ENS ecosystem; and public goods, because it kind of states in the Constitution that funds from income funds ENS and other public goods. And so the Constitution specifically states that public goods within Web3 should be funded. And so those are the working groups. The working group rules were passed as a social proposal. And again, just like the Constitution, it means that the DAO could, move forward and pass proposals without abiding to the social proposals, which are the working group rules. But part of kind of building that culture within a DAO is, I guess, like people in positions of influence, like stewards and large delegates, kind of advocating to adhere to social rules. And if you think about it, like a lot of major decisions within a DAO kind of come down to whether or not everyone chooses to abide by social rules or not. And so the working groups were kind of created by having an election where the entire DAO was able to vote on electing stewards for each of the working groups. And then it's this DAO-wide election that gives working groups and their stewards the legitimacy to carry out and make decisions on their own. And so essentially what happened within the first 6 months is that there was an election, stewards were identified and elected, and they passed a budget, and things kind of got off to a really slow start. But this is like another important aspect of, I think, managing a DAO and the benefit of social rules, which is that wastage is potentially like a really big issue in DAOs, and so is potentially like self-interested extraction of funds, particularly when there is no direction in terms of what the DAO should be doing or who is in a position to distribute funds and things like that. So I guess a win for the DAO, in my opinion, is that the difference between the first term, which was the first 6 months of the year, and the second term, which started in July for the second 6 months of the year, the funding that the DAO working groups received increased significantly from, I think, potentially like $400,000 across 3 working groups or 4 working groups in the first, when the first budget was passed, to $3.5 million just recently. And I think the amount of funding that the working groups received recently is kind of a testament to how effectively the working group rules are working as like a social structure within the ENS DAO. And I guess along with having rules, like an important part of social rules is kind of iterating and experimenting. I think the hardest thing about, something I think about often, is that ENS is a protocol that, you know, we want to exist in 100 years, and DAOs are very new. And so balancing doing the least risky thing possible to ensure the survival and longevity of the protocol, while also having kind of some space to experiment and iterate on things that have never been done before. And so with the working group rules, we kind of iterated on that, and they were repealed and replaced in June. And yeah, I think that's the other thing with social rules, is that they are more adaptable than executable rules, which, well, actually rules don't have to be executable, but executable proposals, once they're passed, it's kind of done, whereas social rules, once they're in place, they can still be adapted. Okie dokie. And so and then within the social rules, I'll just go back to the diagram. So within the social rules, there are working groups and the working group rules. Another important aspect of the DAO is the governance forum. And so the governance forum, I guess, is what a lot of people kind of associate with the DAO. And it's common for people who participate in a forum to feel like they are members of the DAO, even though that might legally be inaccurate. And for the ENS DAO, the governance forum is definitely kind of the heartbeat of the governance activity. And there is a code of conduct. And what's interesting, I think, about the governance forum is that it is like its own entity, and something that I kind of think about as well in terms of what success might look like for the ENS DAO is having multiple governance forums, and so like a diversity of different social environments, which means that you kind of, depending on the breadth and like the range of your community, you don't have to get every single person who is a user or involved in your project into the same governance forum, based on whatever the requirements are of the executable vote. So for ENS, there is a requirement that you have 100,000 ENS to post a vote on chain. And if you have that, then you can like completely ignore essentially the social environment and just post a vote on chain. For that vote to pass, it needs 1 million votes to reach quorum and a majority of votes in favor of the proposal. So a lot of people, most people, don't have 100,000 votes. And so they then rely on the governance forum and the associated proposal flow to be able to move proposals through the DAO. And something that is kind of interesting is that in the piece, I actually say that like the governance process is something that should be passed as a social rule really early on. And we didn't do this with ENS. And so the governance proposal flow was kind of documented in some governance docs, but it was never passed on Snapshot by the DAO as a social proposal. And it's actually something I'm working on in the coming weeks. And I think in hindsight, the benefit of not passing that proposal immediately is that we have had like the experience of putting through many proposals and kind of iterating on what the requirements and the thresholds are. But like I said earlier, the point of social proposals, which are in their nature off-chain because they're not executable, they don't relate to the protocol or the treasury, is that you can just put forward another proposal and change and iterate things. So I'm just going to quickly get a time check because I don't want to go over just because I know that the lineup is jam-packed. But okay, so yeah. So I think this diagram here kind of shows that if you think about the DAO in the center of a community, and basically this social environment is what is currently the state of things for the ENS DAO. So a lot of these different components of the social environment are run or operated or administered by the core team. But the point of a DAO is that we're kind of moving away from this idea that there is like a centralized organizational body that that governs everything. And so, in my opinion, something that would kind of increase the anti-fragility of the ENS DAO is for whether it's competing social environments or really niche and specific social environments to emerge from the community as a whole, that also participate, that also view themselves as part of the DAO, kind of as we refer to it in Web3, which kind of includes all of the social components. And I think that is kind of the win that I'm working towards with ENS personally. And yeah, I guess like the most important thing that I would kind of take away from social rules is that that social rules and DAOs are more important and more flexible than most people realize. And I would say as well that potentially the format of the social rules matters. And so having something like a constitution can kind of feel almost like you are setting up a legal system. And that's kind of how I think about ENS, which is that it's a state and, the social rules are similar to legislation. And yeah, so I definitely would encourage people to think about all of the different kind of social environments that could be attached to their DAO, and then I guess like starting anywhere is a good place, and but with a constitution is probably where I'd start, followed by a governance process, and then kind of whatever social rules need to be put in place to manage the day-to-day operations of the DAO and its mission. But yeah, that's kind of been my experience. I'm still kind of learning every day. And so hopefully I'll have something more to report in a couple of weeks, or definitely in a few months, but yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Alisha. That was a really insightful kind of overview. And hopefully this is one of those things where you get to report this in real time and we get to observe your learnings and how do we actually quickly adapt that to other communities.